HarperCollins presents The Unexpected by Wiles, read by Gemma, Whelan. Prologue.
It was obviously a bad idea, in retrospect, to run away, age 10, in the middle of the night, in the middle of nowhere, in the middle of a different country. And yet it came to seem inevitable. How that neon moon hung over the black trees like an overripe peach, as they stood in the car park, dithering, Robin hanging back, Kessie urging on. How, after they'd continued into the forest, following a frail torch beam, and found themselves lost, strange sounds began to close in on them. Branches creaking like bad cellists, owl whoops and bat skitters, the moaning of distant planes, and the scuttle of giant, furry spiders, so very possible after that sleepover screening of arachnophobia the week before. How, as they stumbled on in the dark, over tree roots and potholes, fatigue entangled their fear. How, finally, once they could go on no longer and found a glade to lie down in, it seemed impossible that they would ever be able to get to sleep on that damp, knobbly earth, burrowed in blankets, shivering up against each other. How ecstatic their delight when they woke, with aching bodies, to find themselves in the epicenter of a vast orchestra of birdsong, surrounded by iridescent green. How they celebrated by leaping around like sprites and then binging on a glut of stolen custard creams from their backpacks. How visceral the sense of freedom, away from all the bitchy girls on the school trip, away from everyone except each other, protected beneath the canopy of a gnarled old oak which had quietly watched over them all night, like a fairy godmother. How they vowed to stay besties forever, and to never take off their half-of-a-heart necklaces. How delight ceded to panic when they realized that they had no idea how to get back to the Outdoor Pursuits Centre, and would be in a shiteload of trouble if they did. How that distant siren wail could be the police out looking for them already. How it might lead to prison, or worse, to enforced separation. How Kessie began to wail about what the news that they were missing might do to her mum, who was already turning translucent in her final months of illness. How finally, late that afternoon, after they managed to find their way back, they were not in fact met with shouts and dire punishments, but instead by faces creased with worry. How they learned, then, what had happened. Not to Kessie's mum, after all, but to Robin's dad, during the night. Part 1. Chapter 1. Robin. The bus shunts forward in the traffic, then stops. Grinding her teeth, Robin asks herself why, oh why, she didn't just get a taxi. But it's just a small slice of time. She needs to be more like Berlioz, her bristle-nosed catfish, who spends his days contentedly inching along the glass of her tank while the prettier fish flicker about. A shaggy man gets on at the next stop and tries to persuade the driver to let him ride, even though his card isn't working, and a snake of impatient passengers lengthens outside with glowering faces like scales in the rain. She texts Kessie to say she'll be late. Kessie will be powering along on her bike right now, regardless of the weather, perhaps turning into Brick Lane already, with that enormous waterproof 80s purple cape billowing behind her. Robin has long envied Kessie's talent for finding distinctive vintage clothes bargains, and her confidence in flaunting them. But then, Kessie doesn't have to wear corporate attire 5 days a week. Robin usually ends up buying most of her own clothes at the jigsaw by the office during snatched lunch breaks, and mostly sticking to black or navy. She pulls her book out of her bag. Margaret Mead's Coming.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?